Just want to welcome you to our latest edition of Change Chats. For anyone who hasn't been to one of these, the way that they work is that we pick a particular topic and we provide you with tips and expertise on that topic. We want the sessions to be really informal and as interactive as possible. And how today will work will that each panel member will speak about their area of expertise. But while they are doing so, please feel free to post any questions in the chat at any time. I'll be monitoring the chat and I will direct your questions to the panel as they are coming through. As you may have noticed, we do record these sessions and everyone who is registered, because people just have to keep their eye on the microphones if that's okay. So we do record these sessions and everyone who is registered will receive a copy of the recording. So if for any reason you do need to leave unexpectedly or you want to share it with somebody afterwards, you will be able to do so. Also, the recording will be made available on our YouTube page and will be publicised on our social media channels. So today's session is on the Renters' Right Act, what now? And I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by an excellent panel. And before we do get into the main area, I just want each one of the panel to introduce themselves. So one at a time. Teresa, do you want to introduce yourself to the group, please?
Thanks, Michael. I'm Teresa Howarth. I'm the Associate Consultant for Trueman Change for Private Sector Housing, and I'm also a Strategic Lead for Private Sector Housing at East Suffolk Council.
Great stuff. Coming to Al, you next.
Hi, yes, I'm Al Mcclenahan. I work at the non-profit organisation Justice for Tenants, and I head up our local authority support for rent repayment orders, civil penalties and debt recovery.
Thank you. Over to you, Helen.
Hello, everyone. I'm Helen Buckingham. I'm a chartered EHP of 1,000 years, and I currently spend a few days a week working with Jigsaw, which I'll tell you all about shortly. Thank you.
And last but not least, Ben.
Hi, I'm Ben Yarrow. I run a company called Marks Out of Tenancy. We run a service called OccupyD, which provides data to local authorities, which I will show you later.
Great stuff. Thank you, everybody. So the first question, I'm opening up to Teresa, and it's a straightforward. So Teresa, the question is, why have you chosen this subject for discussion today?
Well, if I'd had a crystal ball a couple of months ago and said, let's go for the 31st of October for a chat about the Renters' Rights Act, I'd have been kind of, you'd have all thought I was some sort of clairvoyant, because the Renters' Rights Act became an act on Monday. So the timing couldn't really have been better. So in terms of a piece of legislation and kind of one that we've been waiting for a long time, it's almost reached that stage of getting a little bit bored, because it was going to be here in March and then it was going to be June and then it was going to be September. But we are here now. So we now know the what, we understand the what the Renters' Rights Act is going to be. There's some indication of when, but again, we haven't got the full detail of when. But today really is about the how. How are we going to deliver what is not a bit more of business as usual? It's not like a new set of regulations that have appeared, like the smoke and carbon dioxide regs. And I think it would probably be fair to say that there's probably no one on this call who's been sitting waiting for this piece of legislation to come into play. Some of you will be dealing with LGR, some of you will have been through LGR and dealing with the consequence of it. I think we all struggle with staff retention, recruitment, and that issue of retirement. Helen talked about having been an EHP for a gazillion years. I'm in the same camp, and this work I'm doing with Trueman Change is part of my flexible retirement plan. So staff capacity is a real issue, but a change is needed within our services to be able to effectively deliver the Renters' Rights Act. It's not about business as usual with a little bit more on top. And we've got a housing crisis. Everybody talks about the housing crisis and it never seems to get any better or go away. We've got a precarious private rented sector where there are also issues around ageing landlords, competency of landlords. And I promised myself I wouldn't go down the Rachel Reeves route, but there are landlords who just don't do what they should be doing, even when they know or should know. And then the financial margins around being a private landlord are not what they used to be, and the complexity of the legislation that we deliver. So today for me is about exploring how we can help each other with this challenge. It's not about the detail of the Renters' Rights Act. It's not a training session, and there are other providers who will be and are providing that for now. So this is more about exploring what resources are available, how we can help each other through what is going to be a difficult time. And I'm just going to do a shout out to Suzanne Smith, the independent landlord. So if any of you haven't come across Suzanne, I'd highly recommend looking her up, because apart from anything else, she produces the most amazing YouTube videos, and she's done the Renters' Rights Act explained in 7 minutes.
Hello.
So if you need
So
to
the
share
thing that
that
I
with
sent
other
you,
people,
there's
so
a red box
so
that
that's
join
there.
the event. Just click on that.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to hand over now to Al, who's going to give us just a recap of the main provisions of the Renters' Rights Act, just as a bit of a refresher. But as I've said, this is not a training session about that.
Yeah, no, thank you, Teresa. I'll be very kind of brief in the overview, because I think one of the biggest things that's going to change the approach is just statutory duties to issue civil penalties for 23 new breaches and offences, largely around tenancy reform changes, what's in tenancies, evictions, how they're handled, protection from Eviction Act offences, being registered with the Landlord Ombudsman, the private rented sector database, a new power to issue a civil penalty just if there is a Category 1 hazard in existence, and then the new provisions about anti-discrimination, no more kind of rental bidding. And on top of that, we've got vastly expanded investigatory powers, where the government guidance has come out now, and I believe that's coming in 2 months, which will make it a lot easier to really find out what's going on, get information, to identify where any offence or breach might be.
Great stuff. So I've got a few questions lined up. So the first question that we've got is around Jigsaw. So coming over to Helen. So what are the main resources that Jigsaw are providing to councils? And can you give us a bit of an overview about Jigsaw, please?
Yeah, sure, Michael. So Jigsaw is an organisation, a very small little organisation, but we'd like to think very effective, in its second year of funding from MHCLG. So we are funded directly from them. We answer to them. We have direct contact with them. And the purpose of us being here, if you didn't already know, and I appreciate many of you on the call will know, I hope you do, is that we are here to support local authorities in their preparedness for the Renters' Rights Act. So we are in our second year. We're due to finish at the end of March next year, so not long to go unless we get another pot of money to keep us going. And really the easiest way to see what we're about is to go on our K-Hub site. We have over 1,300 people on there now. I'll post a link in a second. And everything we do is on there, so we're very transparent. So we've got discussions on there. We've got our events calendar where you can see our gazillions of webinars that we run, and we probably do 20, 30, 40 a year in our first year, so we are doing the same again this year. So it's a phenomenal amount. We speak, we bring in experts, and importantly, very importantly, we bring in MHCLG and they tell us from the horse's mouth. So all of those events are free to anyone that wants to come. We are restricted to .gov members, I must say, on the K-Hub site. So do go and have a look at that. And we are a team. We're a small team of, I think, 7 or 8 of people like me. So been around a very long time. We are ex-heads, directors. I've also been quite senior in central government. So we talk policy as well. And we each look after a region. And I'm in the East of England, so I look after the East of England region. And actually, the Jigsaw group for the East of for East, I see Jo Evans is on the call today. She's our chair for the East of England region. And the East of England, we have a lot going on. We have 50 local authorities. We are very heavily 2-tier. So we have a lot of concern not only about implementing this piece of legislation, but we have LGR and Devo waiting in the wings, and I'm very happy to chat about that shortly. So yes, we are here as Jigsaw to help get everyone ready. A couple of things I would point you to, if you do want to go to our K-Hub site and have a look around, is our preparedness checklist. You'll find that in the library and documents section. I'll put it in the chat if I get a second. But it really is, I think it's the best thing we've done in the year plus we've been going, because it takes you in local authorities through every thinking process, every mindset challenge, every practical what do I need to do now moment of this journey. And so I think it's hugely helpful. We've also done quite a bit of work with the risk register, because getting this whole piece in front of the senior people in your organisation is a skill in itself. And I think if you use those two pieces, the preparedness checklist and the risk register information, and I know I'm going to send something out, Jigsaw will send something out more on the risk register very shortly as well. So those two documents will be enormously helpful, I'm proud to say, in getting you to the right place. We are also proposing some face-to-face training on the new investigatory powers, which again is a national commitment. We'll be piloting it early in the new year and rolling out one event or more in every region. We can't take the thousands of people that we know want to come and see us in person. We will have to limit it, but then we hope to underpin that with an e-learning program to continue for many months afterwards. So yes, doing so much online, but more face-to-face stuff waiting in the wings. So probably, Michael, that will do for now, but I might remember something else in a minute and I'll come back. But thank you.
Great stuff. Have we got any questions from people in attendance today about Jigsaw, or any of the panel wants to add anything further? I'll just leave that for about 30 seconds. Joe Evans, you've got your hands up?
Yeah, I just want to say, if anybody hasn't joined their local Jigsaw regional group, then it is a brilliant thing to do. It's going to save you from creating lots of documents, lots of policies. So if you haven't, then do join it. You won't, there's nothing to lose. So thank you.
Right, so if anybody does think of any further questions in regards to Jigsaw, please pop them in the chat and we can come back to Helen throughout the next hour or so. So Alan, coming over to yourself now. So how is Justice for Tenants supporting councils, and is that help available to everyone?
Yeah, so our support, it all kind of centres around assisting with kind of civil penalties, rent repayment orders, and then just kind of collecting the money from those enforcement actions. We do have funding for free services for 191 local authorities, of which we're currently contracted with 141. So there's still 50 slots free. There's no prospect for that to increase beyond 191, largely because of LGR. The funders don't want to provide support to local authorities that might not be there in a few years. We expect all of those slots for free services to be filled kind of February next year. There's been a bit of an uptick since it got royal assent, so it's hard to predict. But even beyond that, local authorities can still use the services. They're not part of the 191, but they won't get any kind of free services. And I can, if you want, Michael, I can kind of break it down into the kind of different types of service, just give a kind of overview. Yeah. So I'd say a big part of it, this kind of starting point is assistance with policies around enforcement. So we have got a model private sector housing enforcement policies, but we're probably best known for building very effective civil penalty policies that are designed to be compliant with the current statutory guidance, the upcoming statutory guidance, all the key precedents. They're designed to reduce grounds of appeal, to be easy and quick to use for officers, and to ensure internally everyone's consistent, everyone's applying the same criteria. And then every local authority we work with have access to our free 10-minute civil penalty generator, and that basically, from an officer perspective, means if you want to apply your policy to an offence, it's a matter of 6 simple steps. And then you have the legal notices ready to serve. And it's fair to say for simple kind of breaches, often basically non-HMO licensing ones, so maybe an improvement notice breach or not giving electrical certificate, it is a 10-minute job. And then we usually will deliver like a full day's training on civil penalties, kind of best practices and stuff like that. And then we have a review service, which currently it's reviewing 150 notices per month. We're predicting in about a year and a half that to be maybe even as much as 1,500 per month. And it's much, much more likely, when we looked at why there was hesitancy with civil penalties currently, it's fair to say it's just much more likely an officer will sit down and carry out that civil penalty process if they know I'm going to be done in 15 minutes. And when I'm done, I click a button, my part is done. And then a few days later, I will get a very detailed review along with suggestive changes to make my notice more compliant with legislation, precedent and policy. It feels very supportive. So there's no kind of concern, or I don't have time for this, what will it lead to? And then there's a longitudinal support throughout that process, dealing with the written representations, even managing appeals. We can review evidence bundles, we can submit the evidence bundles when there's an appeal, send the skeleton argument, precedence bundle, and do the advocacy in the tribunal in the hearing. We've got 4 full-time advocates, 2 part-time ones who just do tribunal hearings. But then after you serve the civil penalty, the Renters' Rights Act means that a local authority can then apply for a rent repayment order, and they will be guaranteed to get 2 years of universal credit. And that money is ring-fenced by law. It goes back to fund the local authority PRS enforcement activity. That doesn't go back to the DWP. We've got regular meetings with the DWP. Most of the local authorities that they've spoken to have said, we're just going to click a button on the CPN generator, civil penalty generator, send it to JFT, and then JFT's law firm will just do all the parts of the rent repayment order. It's not going to require any local authority time or resource. It's just going to be a source of revenue and a source of deterring criminality. And the DWP is opening up, for the first time ever, they're opening up the universal credit data specifically for local authority, private sector housing teams to bring rent repayment orders because of the changes in the Renters' Rights Act. And then the final kind of part that links it all together is that we've got a law firm that should get SRA approval, Solicited Regulation Authority approval, in about 7-8 weeks. And that's just going to exist to enforce against landlords who do not pay their civil penalties or their rent repayment order debts. So that will be by way of pre-action stuff and then putting a charging order on the property. And I feel like without that final part, local authorities will spend a lot of time and resource carrying out civil penalties to comply with the statutory duties. But what will it achieve? It'll take up your time. There'll be no deterrent because the landlord won't pay. And the revenue that would come from that to help fund enforcement is denied. And I think Operation Jigsaw's questionnaire on that, the NRLA's fact-finding found that it's in about 90% of local authorities, that's broadly what happens. Loads of these new statutory duties will be for £3,000-4,000. Can easily imagine it goes to finance, legal, sundry debts. Nothing happens. Year later, write it off. Then you're stuck doing enforcement action that achieves nothing and wasted time. So the idea is kind of just all the kind of parts of the enforcement, supporting with it all and closing the loop. You investigate, you enforce, the debt is paid, the polluter pays and helps fund the service to do more work, support more tenants, improve standards in the PRS. That's, I think, a good overview of it.
I think for me, Al, that final step in the process is absolutely critical. I think the research found wasn't about 50% of CPNs were recovered. So if we can have a much better sort of follow up, and so it becomes a proper penalty, not just a paper penalty, it's going to make so much difference to everybody, both as a deterrent, a true deterrent to landlords, because they will be fined rather than something, oh yeah, I got one of them, I didn't pay it, it's just gone away. So yeah, no, that's great.
Oh, I think that's exactly right, and I think that the sad part is, it's just under 50% civil penalties are paid, but almost all of the ones that are paid were because the landlord voluntarily paid. If someone doesn't pay, it's a tiny fraction that are actually collected. So you're bang on with that, Teresa.
Thank you both. Helen has put some links in the chat as she said she would, so if people want to have a look at them, they can do so. So just changing gear a little bit, it's not just about the doing though, is it? And Helen, we're coming to yourself here, but it's also about culture change. Can you explain how the cultural effect
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of stepping back when I think about culture change and looking at local government as a whole, because that's where I'm perhaps more of an expert than the purely housing sense. And, in my 1,000 years of being quite senior in local and central government, I've been through many a change, as we all have, I'm sure. There's never a dull moment, is there? Someone's always either just recovered for a reorganisation or about to go through another one. And they are worrying, of course they are, and they're very distracting. But I would appeal to those of you that are involved in delivering these so important transformational services, such as the Renters' Rights Act, to not try and let yourself be too distracted by that. It's very easy for people, not yourselves, but other people with other agendas, to perhaps be a little bit distracted because it suits where they are, but actually for people delivering services on the front line, I'd like to think that your job will continue and you will find yourself in a better place. The reason is when reorganisations come along, you know, when the music stops, not everyone has a chair, and that's the fact. But those delivering these important services will have the chair. I know in my in my own region here, most of the business cases for this particular bunch of reorganisations and devolution are based on the top 2 or 3 layers of management to get the savings. The rest will be unaffected. And there is huge recognition that services still need to be delivered, especially those that affect people like our tenants, our service users. The bins have to be emptied. This piece of legislation is transformational in itself. Of course, it will have to be delivered. So don't be distracted by that. In fact, try and turn it on its head. And I know we all treat change differently, don't we? Some welcome it, some run a mile. But I really do think the benefits and the opportunities in this whole Devo piece in LGR outweigh the downsides, because you know, in my area in the east of England, we have many 2-tier authorities, 2-tier arrangements, and most of my career has been spent in working one half or the other. I've not spent much time in unitaries, but the problem with that is that we can become quite isolated and teams can be quite small. And so what we have here now in this whole LGRP piece is a joining up, and you may find yourselves as part of a bigger team. So you will have more resilience, more people to call upon, more expertise in other areas. You might find yourself closer to trading standards, who are a whole bunch of professionals, our cousins, if you like, who are already quite experienced in some of this stuff. So I think the opportunities are there, resilience will be there, expertise will be there, and inevitably, as some people choose to walk away from an organisation for their own reasons, there will be opportunities for career moves. So if you are at all aspirational and you want to get on, now is a great time to get yourself in that headspace and start to think about that. So I think that there's a lot to be gained. But for those on the front line delivering this piece of legislation, it's a lift and shift. It's not one to be threatened by. And Al, hearing you say that some of the funding is being dodged by people who are in fearful of LGR review and the money, the tap's been switched off, I think that's a big fat dodge. And I would like to come and talk to you about how we can release some of that. So let's pick that conversation up later. Anyway, hope that was helpful.
Thank you. Go on, sorry, Teresa.
Yeah, you know, and I think for me, so the other opportunity that you know LGR, you know, in combination with the Renters' Rights Act brings, is with bigger teams, there is an opportunity to think about how we're delivering private sector housing services. You know, there are good landlords out there, and at the moment, you know, are we truly focusing only on those landlords that are rogue and criminal and, you know, misinformed or ignorant? Are we truly focusing our action, or are we responsive services that just pick up, you know, when the tenant complaint comes in or a piece of intelligence lands on our inbox? And we've been exploring, you know, with a number of different councils about, you know, doing things differently. So that proactive approach to dealing with landlords, and alongside that, supporting good landlords. That's something which culturally we don't do. And my experience is that landlords actually really appreciate being told, you know, thank you for being a good landlord, and they appreciate with networking with other good landlords, and they actually support councils taking enforcement action against those landlords that are not in the same space as them, because they've spent their money and getting compliant properties, and they actually really welcome that councils are taking enforcement action against people who haven't. But we need to change our mindset as private sector housing managers to get into that space where we can say, actually, it's this, you know, if we want to keep our good landlords in the sector and make them feel that they're not on our target list, maybe we need to spend a little bit of time and a little bit of resource now welcoming them into the new world of the Renters' Rights Act, with, instead of loads of stuff about all of the, you know, the legal provisions that are coming, something about that says, you know, we need you. Without you, our housing crisis is only going to be deeper. And, you know, as councils, we'll never have enough resources to go after every landlord. So the more landlords we can get into that place of self-regulation, the better we will be to be able to enforce against those that need it. We do need good landlords. We don't need negligent, criminal, disengaged landlords, and those who place their tenants' health and well-being at risk. And those are our target audience. And I'm going to use that as a nice little segue, Ben, to move across to you to talk about data.
That was a beautiful segue. Yes. Hi, hello everybody. I'm Ben Yarrow. I run an operation called Marks Out of Tenancy. We've been working with good and the not particularly good landlords for many years, helping to promote great landlords, to show that they are great landlords, to promote them. We run a website where tenants can leave stories and rate and review their landlords and their rental experiences. We worked with a pretty forward-thinking and progressive local authority a few years back and tried to help them to fix the puzzle and answer the question of how can we tell how many people occupy a property. So I'm here today to talk to you about a service that we now offer to local authorities. It's been used to great effect. And it's a product that we call OccupyD, and it looks at the number of financial identities which are connected to a specific property, and it's helping local authorities to do things like find unlicensed HMOs, to find empty properties, to find properties which are overcrowded, and also to find, as Teresa's beautifully segued to find landlords who are operating within the private rental sector but doing a good job, i.e. who aren't renting out houses and states of overcrowding. I wondered, I've hidden the addresses as much as possible. I wondered if I could just quite quickly show you an example of some of the data that we've worked on recently. Let me just make that slightly bigger. And you should be able to see my screen now. So hidden, but you're just gonna have to trust me on this one. In this row, sorry, in this column A here is a list of property addresses. You can see there's lots of property addresses down there. The numbers that are within these columns are financial identities which have been associated with those property addresses, with that particular property address there, over these periods of time. So we're able to drill down and look back 3 years historically to identify which properties have been occupied by greater numbers of people. We're going to flip to a different view here, and I'm going to flip to a different view, and I'll show you as a housing officer. If you're walking down a street, you see. Let's go for something else here. Okay, so anything that has true written in this column here means that this is a licensed property. This property had a mandatory license. As a housing officer, it's quite a useful tool to be able to look at these properties and identify that they have a license. But it's also very useful here. You can see, as a housing officer, it's probably also a good idea to give this property here a knock and this property here a knock, which is within exactly the same street. So, something I alluded to earlier. We're also able to help local authorities find empty properties. These are properties, they're in Nottingham, they have no financial identities associated with them over the last 36 months. Slightly outside of the Renters' Rights Act, I understand. However, the Renters' Rights Act gives local authorities a greater number of powers. This system that we've created can help local authorities to identify if a landlord is actually moving back into the property that they're claiming that they need to move back into, which is a great tool to be able to kind of provide evidence for that. So yeah, so we're kind of positioned as the data experts, helping organisations like Justice for Tenants and other organisations and local authorities to help them find unlicensed properties and empty properties, especially with the new Renters' Rights Act coming in.
Joe, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Ben, can you identify rented properties, private rented properties per se, as against ones that are owner occupied and social housing?
Yeah, we can certainly help to build up a better picture. We can add our data to other data sets to help local authorities build up a picture of the tenure. What we tend to find is that properties that are owner occupied have a very, very low churn level. We call it a churn level of occupants over the last 3 years. The same with socially rented properties. They have a slow, steady number, almost set number of occupants over the last 3 years. Conversely, properties operating within the private rental sector tend to have a higher churn level because it's the transient nature of private renting, right? So yeah, we can certainly add colour to additional data sets, or in combination with other data sets, it certainly elevates that intelligence level. Absolutely, yeah.
Perfect. Would you mind if you just put your email address in the chat? Would that be okay?
Yes.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks, Ben. We've had a couple of questions come into the chat, one of which came in just as Al had finished his bit, so taking us back a couple of steps, but I didn't want to get involved when Teresa was doing so expertly, moving us on to the next thing. So a question from Simon Chambers. Is a charging order generally the end goal in respect of unpaid CPNs? Do JFT attempt to seize any assets or attachment of earnings from company directors or individual landlords?
No, it isn't, because the end goal is getting the money back. So we tend to have to kind of recover about £1 million of rent repayment order debt a year. What we've actually found is that a lot of cases will get to the point of that final hearing for the final charging order, and so far about 90% of them, suddenly the landlord actually takes action and it doesn't quite happen. What we're likely to do is one of the things we're looking at is, if you're looking to do a charging order, these new investigatory powers mean that you might be able to find out more information about the landlord's portfolio size. Because there's an issue within a local authority is, do you want to force an order for sale when that property might be tenanted? And there isn't really scope in the legislation, we're looking into it, but to say, we don't want vacant possession. But then again, as a local authority, you don't want to be a landlord to the tenants as well. So one of the things that we're looking at is, can we use, or can a local authority use, the new investigatory powers to say, we know these are the properties, we know that's the landlord's home address, we're going to write to the mortgage providers, find out which properties have equity in them enough to pay the debt, and if the property that the landlord lives in, as an owner occupier does, we're going to put the charge on that property, then we'll do the order for sale. And then, if need be, sell that property without that landlord's consent. But amazingly, it's very unlikely you get to that final bit. The amount of time that it all gets resolved literally in the period involving 6 days before up until the hearing is very high. But no, the end game isn't just let's get a charge on it. The end game is let's get the debts paid and back into the private sector housing service.
Thank you very much. We've also had a question from Trueman Change's own Justin, but I'm going to skip over that for a second and just go to Ellen Spencer, who's got a question for you, Ben. Ben, if we needed 1 or 2 individual properties to be looked at, can you do this, or is it just for a larger area?
Yeah, absolutely. We can do 1 or 2 properties. We've just helped a local authority do a scan on 1 property. The evidence from that scan that we produced for them is being used in court on the 6th of November next week. So yeah, we can do 1 or 2 properties. We can do a couple of streets, a couple of wards. We can do an entire borough. We can do anything and everything in between. Please email me and I will throw some bits and bobs together. Yeah, sure. Yeah, Ellen. Yeah, please email me. My email address is there. I'd love to help you out.
Yeah, great stuff. And as Ben says, he has put his email address in the chat as well. So going back to the question from Justin. So what does a private sector housing team of 10 staff look like in 2 years' time if they embrace all the opportunities discussed and move from reactive to proactive? For example, new income streams, data engaging with positive landlords, etc.
Good question. And I think before it can, oh, sorry, Al, I'll go quickly because otherwise I'll forget what I was going to say. I think the key question for me before that one is when will we get the renters' rights new burdens funding, because that will kickstart the ability to do civil penalty notices, because we will then be able to resource up for that additional work. So once we've got that in place and we know how much it is and when it's coming, I think that's a question that probably you would be able to answer, but quite difficult now.
Al, are you going, and then we'll go to Ben?
Yeah, so I've kind of thought about this a fair bit just from obviously strategizing with a lot of local authorities, and I think one part of it will be kind of just that there'll be a lot more enforcement. It'll have to be an enforcement first approach, and that requires transparent policies and processes, and it will probably start with a really effective triaging service. So like if a tenant complains about, my boiler's broken, I've reported it to the landlord, they haven't done anything. At the moment, a lot of local authorities will look to resolve, look into that boiler issue. Whereas in the future, it might be, we got these statutory duties, there's going to be a lot of strategic litigation on where the local authorities are carrying it out, because there'll be published data. And so we'll probably see like a triaging service which says, okay, you've made this complaint, we're going to look into it, but as part of our process, give us all the tenancy agreements that you've had for the last few years for this property, so we can see if they're compliant. Automatically check, is the landlord on the PRS database, registered with the landlord ombudsman, ask the tenants, how many tenants do you live with? If the tenant's been evicted or is being harassed, just saying, if they said the landlord's asked them to leave, give us a copy of all of that correspondence, so that you're already going to be going there, and almost certainly a lot of the time, probably more than half the time you visit a property reactively, you will, because of the new duty, be issuing a civil penalty. And it isn't necessarily all that much extra work to issue multiple. And then this way you can kind of deal with all the statutory duties in an effective way, in a process and policy driven way. And you can evidence, hey, we're taking reasonable steps to comply with these statutory duties. And possibly in the short term, it might involve kind of using other resources until we get the workforce up a little bit. There's some services that have retired firefighters who will just do spot checks on HMO licensed properties to see are they fire safe and stuff like that. There might be an element of that just while we wait for the workforce to grow a little bit.
Great stuff, thanks Al. Ben, you got your hand up?
Yes. What's it going to look like? I think it could look like 2 different things. Firstly, it could look a little bit like Minority Report, with lots of whizzy things and lots of people wearing virtual reality and jumping around in Lycra, swishing the air around with lots of funky data and access to things. However, bit grounded in reality. There is, I think, going to be some hesitation about waiting for the new burdens funding. Why should we jump at this? Let's wait until we see and understand how much money we're going to get first of all. There are organisations like us, like Justice for Tenants, and some other organisations providing services to local authorities who are happy to provide some of our services free of charge, or a time free of charge, effectively to help local authorities seed fund this initial process to encourage those that are more proactive and more outgoing and more adventurous So please get in touch if you're interested in doing that.
Thanks, Ben. Joe's asked a question in the chat. Does anybody have any advice for PSH managers who know it will be challenging to convince their directors more resources will be needed even from day one when Part 1 comes into force, i.e. tenancy relations officers? Who wants to answer that one?
I'll jump in with, and then do you want to go first this time, Al?
Yeah, well, I don't have a great answer for this, so but I will say it's our policy lead, who kind of works more on the advice side and in the third sector side, knows that there's quite a lot of coordination going on in the third sector, because pre-white paper there was a push to say these new, what are now the statutory duties, they need to be statutory duties, because how a local authority is going to be held to account through judicial reviews. And I think what's becoming clear is there's quite a more coordinated effort between third sector organisations like public interest law centre, stuff like that, to basically think, okay, we know out of 290 odd local authorities, many won't comply with the statutory duties. We will have data that will prove that, and we will target judicial reviews. And one of the strategies that the policy lead said is being discussed is, when that's done, the comms around it are going to basically target, you know, saying, we asked the executive director of blah 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 local authority why they had allowed the local authority to breach their rights to protect tenants from damp and mold and unlawful eviction. We asked for comment from the head of legal services as to how they could allow this breach of law to happen, where there'll be no comment. And then they'll kind of use that to go to other local authorities and say, hey, we've just done this judicial review, your data shows it's a breach, what do you want to do about it? And I think in a way, I know that doesn't convince someone straight away, but if there's knowledge that that is what's being planned, and it is, that I think is quite motivating, because it's not just we're going to set the precedent that the public interest law centre and of those that are doing it. It's we're going to do it in a way that we think will bring about change, because they've been saying, well, what happens? So what? What if the local authority doesn't care? If the judicial review finds a finding of fact, but probably people at the top might care. So at least sharing that is what's being planned in broadly the third sector, the kind of organisations that maybe you might expect to take legal action against local authority. It's much more coordinated. It's been planned from the point of pushing for this to be a statutory duty.
Helen, Teresa, which one of you two wants to
Go,
come?
Helen.
Yeah, thanks, Al. I think that's a really good summary. I think there's two ways, isn't there, Joe? We've talked about this before, haven't we? Is a encouraging and convincing the powers that be that this needs to be done, and then there's the fear factor. And I think Al's just sort of spoken about the fear factor side. In my head, we start these things nicely, don't we? And Jigsaw's, we do, one of the other things we do, I should have mentioned, is a monthly newsletter. And it's very colourful, quick, 2 sides, easy to read. Edition 5, which was last month, was written for senior leaders and politicians in local government. So it's a very colourful way of hopefully enabling officers in the field to engage, either directly yourself, if you have that opportunity to have that audience, or via your own managers along the way to get to the people you need to get to. But that particularly colourful newsletter is written with that in mind, so you can start using it. Yesterday we held quite a spontaneous 1 hour session. We only billed it 48 hours earlier, as soon as the royal assent had been achieved, and we thought, right, let's get out there and start talking about this now that we have a little bit more information. And with 2 days notice, we had 700 people on the call yesterday for an hour. So given that it's half-term week and it came out of nowhere, that's quite amazing. One of the questions we had, which we've yet to answer fully because we're still wading through a million questions, was, will there be any sanctions against local authorities who don't do this? And we weren't quite sure. I was really interested to hear what you said there, Al, about other experiences, but I think that will be a question that we will answer when we address the Q&A yesterday, and in true Jigsaw style, that will go on our K-Hub. So if I flag that to you, Teresa, perhaps you could circulate that, because I think, you know, as having, you know, been out there on the front line and been at the senior tables, there is quite a trick to getting this early you know, awareness and money coming, because we're all waiting for new burners funding, we're all waiting for the back payments from the PRS database, you know, each time a landlord registers, but that's a way off, we know that. So how on earth can you start hitting the ground running with no money? Well, people are going to have to be brave. We are going to have to ask, and if necessary, put the squeeze on, put the scare on as well. So let me find out what that answer is to the sanctions question that we got yesterday, because that might be useful to have up your sleeve. Okay.
Thank you. Sorry, Teresa.
Yeah, and you know, my answer with my Trueman Change hat firmly on is that, you know, an independent review of where you are and where you want to be goes a long way in convincing, you know, strategic managers of the, you know, the need for that change and that additional staff, and pulls together all of what's been talked about here into one place, one independent report that then you can take and deliver to your senior managers, and it'll be benchmarked against other councils as well. So that would be my offer.
So, Justin, you've got your hand up.
Just going to follow on from what Teresa said. So I was going to say what Teresa said, but also I think that there is an opportunity, a window in terms of politicians. So at this moment in time, all the councillors are going to be really interested in this and be asking questions. And so if any team has the ability to be able to frame what it is that's going to be different going forward in the right way, that's going to create some interest within local councils. Ultimately, what their ambition is the same for everybody, which is it's got to be relatively low impact on the general fund, but equally it's got to raise standard, and it's got to communicate a positive outcome for the people that they're supporting within the constituencies. And I think that there's an opportunity to be able to explain that at this moment in time in the right way, which then creates that influence and momentum within the internal conversations as well. So I think combine all of those things together, and I think there's a real opportunity to be able to make a difference.
Right. Thanks, Justin. If you can keep your camera on, I've actually got a question for yourself. So before you answer, if you want to introduce yourself to everyone here as well. So how does the Renters' Right Act impact on social landlords?
So yeah, hi everyone. I'm Justin Hunt. I'm Trueman Change's housing specialist. Trueman Change do consultancy work with a whole range of different social landlords. And the way I see this is that there is an ecosystem within housing. So you can't do something within one part of housing and not having an impact on the other part of on the other parts of housing. It is all interlinked. What is going to happen, depending on your view as to the nature of the change that's going to happen within private sector housing, it is then going to flow through to social landlords. So whether you're a housing association or a council which owns its own stock and delivers landlord services, ultimately we've seen a significant change since the 1988 Act and everything that's happened within private sector housing. There is going to be a change, and that change is going to happen within the context of a housing crisis, and that then tends to influence the amount of churn that you get within social housing, what it is that's going to be impacting around homelessness services, discharging into the private sector, etc., and the challenges relating to transfers, overcrowding, etc., etc. That has changed within the time that I've been in my career. From 10% turnover of properties within social housing, which provides flexibility and opportunities to be able to address some of the challenges that people are experiencing, down to about 4 or 5%. That's already pretty low, but if that's negatively impact, then that could have even more consequences for the way we manage our properties, allocation policies, etc., etc. So I think those discussions need to be happening as well within the wider housing sector.
Thank you very much, Justin. So we're coming to our last 10 minutes. So probably the last opportunity for people to put in any questions. I'll just read that out, Helen. Helen's just put the RRA has certainly made the headlines for good reasons and less good reasons. So it's a very good time to have conversations with senior officers and politicians in your local area, local authority, and please put something on your website too as an uplift in questions from tenants is predicted. Thanks, Helen. So yeah, as I was saying, we've got about 10 minutes left, so there's about 5 more minutes opportunity for people to put in any questions or put the hand up. And then what we'll do is we'll go around and ask the panel for if they have one more final word, and then we'll touch in with my colleague Fraser Collins to just give a bit of a Trueman Change update before I finish off. So I have a question, which LGR has been mentioned, but some councils are so focused on LGR that it is difficult to get senior leader buy-in. Any suggestions? Who wants to jump in on that?
I
Oh,
think
stumped you.
sorry, Michael. I sort of did cover it earlier in terms of difficult to get senior leader buy-in. Yes, I mean it is, but I think we've probably talked about all the ways of which we can do that, and don't be thrown off track by it. You know, the services still have to be delivered, and even though senior leaders might be out there looking at everything else, they also know services must continue. The law is still there. This flagship piece of legislation, which is transformational, and ultimately it's very good for tenants, and we all want this to happen, and we've longed for it to happen. We now have to make it land. So I think if we can keep those lines of communication going with the powers that be in your organisation, and you know, they will be very aware that things have to still happen. We can't all just run away and say, oh, I'm too busy doing LGR, because that isn't how it works. And this is not the first review we've been through either. So, you know, keep the pressure on in whichever way you can. Some people have much more direct line than others, so it's difficult. There's no one size fits all, is there? So you have to do the nice reminders, like we talked about, and you have to do the scary reminders, but you have to keep the pressure on and be comforted by the fact that you're not alone. You know, LGR or no LGR, this has got to be delivered. So join up and find out who your new friends are in this landscape.
Thank you. Joe, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just to say that a bit of what Justin and Helen have just said is that it's not just transformational for landlords, it's going to be transformational for private sector housing teams and homelessness teams, because we're hoping that, you know, there's this change where the pressure will be taken off homelessness because of the abolition of Section 21. I know initially there'll be some role for tenancy relations officers with some landlords wanting to illegally evict because they're, you know, not very happy about Section 21's not being a route. But I think, you know, if we try to convince those directors, seniors, portfolio holders, whoever they are, that actually with the right support and the right resources, we're going to probably have a shift of, you know, lots of resources needed for homelessness and all of that temporary accommodation that's being used out there at the minute, that hopefully, you know, in 2 to 3 years' time, we're going to see, you know, drastically reduce. So I think that's another way we can probably convince our managers of right resources.
Teresa, you got your hand up?
Yeah, so mine is just really simple. Use your cabinet member, get them on side, find a nice little video that explains what the Renters' Rights Act is like, whether that's Suzanne Smith's independent living one or something else, just something short and snappy, and use your cabinet member to take it up the chain.
Great stuff. So I'm going to come around the panel one final time before I hand over to Fraser. So a bit of a final word from each of you, please. So, or one main takeaway that you'd think people should take from today's session. So Teresa, I'll come to you first.
So I think for me, the biggest challenge is capacity. For all of us moving forward, how we actually deliver the scale of change that's needed and find the time and the headspace to get there. So if Trueman Change can help you with any of that, whether it's culture change or practical support, you know, an extra pair of hands to get you where you need to be, then that's what we're here for.
Great. I'll come to Al next.
Yeah, I think with the kind of new changes that will put initially quite a lot of demands on your service, it's probably just quite helpful to not try and do it alone. If there are, you know, 50, 60, 70% of local authorities in England who are using the same policy to do their enforcement, they're using the same software, generating the same notices, and you get like a bit of a strength in numbers at every stage. You know, you're not doing it in your own way. Every precedent relates to you. The tribunal judges have all seen things the same way. So especially because you might be getting reorged with other local authorities, if you are all taking a more similar approach, that part will be easier, but it's even easier in the short term. And also think about who else might be doing some of the work as well, if it might fall to another team, and maybe have those conversations early so that they know what they need to do as well.
Great stuff. Helen?
Yeah, gosh, there's so many things I could say as a parting shot. I suppose I'd say try not to be a rabbit in the headlights. You know, we've heard about the LGR Devo cloud in the wings. We've also heard about this enormous culture change of this particular piece of legislation, which is enforcement first. For years, we've been talking about enforcement last. Certainly in my policy journey across government, we never talk about enforcement, but here we are, enforcement first. So we've got lots of reasons to be a rabbit in the headlights at the minute, but please don't be, because I think that's the painful way. There are so many organisations out there, many on this call today, and Jigsaw, we are all about helping. And the checklist that I talked about earlier, if you got hold of that and worked through every criteria on that, you will be in a really good place to tackle this. And use your friends, look sideways, look upwards, and don't do nothing, I suppose, because there's plenty of help and support and readiness that you can be doing.
Great stuff. And finally, Ben.
How am I meant to come up with something inspirational and wild after those? Yeah, I can't say anything else that's not been said already. There are a lot of resources out there. Get in touch with someone who knows what they're doing. Trueman Change is one of those organisations that can help point you in the right direction. Yeah,
Thanks.
Get in touch.
Great stuff. And Fraser, if you just want to jump on for a minute, introduce yourself as well, please.
Sure. Thank you, Michael. Can you hear me okay? Yeah.
Yeah, all good.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you, Michael. And yeah, just again, just quickly from me, just thanks everyone for joining the call today. And of course, thank you to a big thank you to our speakers for their expertise and time. We really appreciate it. So I hope the session has given you guys some good takeaways and some ideas. Again, very quickly, I look after the business development and partnership side of things at Trueman Change. So essentially, and just to echo what's already been said and what you may know, our work is about helping teams basically feel equipped and supported through whatever change and transformation they're going through. So we're currently supporting several local authorities tackling similar housing transformation issues, and also supporting councils around wider change support, for example, clients who we're supporting around and through LGR journey, etc. So if there are any current challenges or issues you would like to maybe explore in more detail from today, then I would obviously welcome a follow-up conversation with you. So I'll share my email address in the chat. I'll share a short email with you as a follow-up, but please don't wait for that. Do get in touch with me if you'd like to talk more, and we can continue the conversation, because these change chats are a catalyst for further relationships. A couple of weeks ago we had a change chat, and we're already, I think, 2 councils we've engaged with in the back of that to provide further support. So yeah, there's some good value there. So thanks again, you guys do an amazing job and such an important job in the sector you're in, especially with the pressures you're under. So thank you, and yeah, I hope we can speak again soon. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Fraser. Final words from myself. Just want to reiterate what Fraser said and say thank you again to the panel, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Before we do finish, I just wanted to put some dates out for people's diaries for future change chats. So we've got a culture change in housing change chat on the 14th of November. We've got leading change drawing on psychology on the 28th of November. And we've got middle/senior management challenges during LGR taking place on the 12th of December. All information can be found via that link that I've just posted. I'm having a few little delays today, but it's on its way. If anybody has any other subjects that they'd like us to discuss at future change chats, please put them in the chat, because we're always looking at expanding and adding more topics for discussion. And if you've enjoyed today, as I've mentioned, we do have change chats available on our website. These cover topics such as the LGR, community engagement, change management, culture change, just to name a few. So finally, next steps, as I mentioned at the start of the session, you'll receive an email which will have a copy of the recording of today's session. And also, if you do want to have a chat with anyone on the team, Fraser has just posted his details. So it doesn't look like we've got any more questions. So finally, just want to say thank you again to everybody, panel and everyone, for joining in, and hope everyone has a nice rest of their Friday. Thank you, everyone.